welcome back to another edition of Gary's Record Collection. So the other day I was going through my records and trying to figure out, well, what do I want to show next and some potentials for the future. And I ran across this album that I hadn't really given much thought to. However, it's a great collectible and it's pretty rare, pretty expensive if you try and go and buy it now. Back in 1969, Atlantic Records decided that the way that they needed to promote albums was to send albums to record stores for them to play in a store. However, it's not just the album itself. What they did is they made a special album with an announcer, which is very, that's a lot of money to spend to do all of that. And here it is. This is Atlantic Records' Dusty Springfield, Dusty in Memphis on side 1, and Led Zeppelin, the first Led Zeppelin album, on side 2. And there it is. You can see it. Promotional LP for record department in-store play. Of course, this is back when, there were not only record stores, but there were record departments within, in the big department stores, they had record sections. So Atlantic pressed all these albums and sent them out. And what we have Dusty Springfield, Dusty in Memphis, highlights from that, and then highlights from the first Led Zeppelin album. So best I can tell, this was probably put out in late March or early April of 1969. Dusty in Springfield, Dusty in Memphis was released in March of that year. The first Led Zeppelin album came out in early January. So 2 albums that Atlantic was banking on. Apparently Dusty in Memphis did not do all that well on the charts, but as we know, the Zeppelin album went way high, and of course huge for years. So what we're going to do is we're going to listen to, there's actually an announcer on the album telling you what you're going to listen to. So we're not going to listen to really all the songs, but we're going to skip between each song and listen to what the announcer says, and we'll hear all of it. Because it's fascinating. I think it's fascinating. Here we go. This is right off side 1.
Dusty Springfield went to Memphis and came back with a whole bag full of soul. Atlantic Records put it all into one great package and called it Dusty in Memphis. Here's one selection from their fantastic album, Son of a Preacher Man.
And this was a hit, although I don't know why they say that the album was not a success, but here we go. So Son of a Preacher Man, it was great. Let's skip to the end.
More from Dusty in Memphis. I don't want to hear it anymore.
The announcer is kind of stiff, it seems, but that's just a personal observation, I guess.
Sounds from Dusty in Memphis, a new Atlantic album by Dusty Springfield. Here she is having breakfast in bed.
Ooh. There, it sounds very controversial for 1969. That's funny. Skip ahead.
Now here's a great sound called Windmills of Your Mind.
It just sounds like the record company hired a guy and with like 6 lines on a piece of paper says, go into the booth and just record these. I mean, maybe the guy had no idea what he was doing, but you know what? It's a paying gig, so why not? Here we go. Let's skip to the end of this one. This is actually the last song on this side.
Dusty Springfield, Dusty in Memphis, a great new album on Atlantic Records. Get it. It's available in this record department.
And available in this record department. So obviously it's something that it couldn't have been a pre-release because you can't tell customers to go buy the record if the record's not in store. So it had to have come out after the release of the album in March of '69. All right, let's go to side 2. And that is, of course, Led Zeppelin. So here we go. Let's continue.
Fly with the Led Zeppelin on Atlantic Records.
And it's fascinating. In the beginning of 1969, when they were starting, it was the Led Zeppelin. That's how the band was referred to by seemingly everybody. All right, let's jump ahead.
The Led Zeppelin, a new album, a new group on Atlantic Records.
And then Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You, which, I don't know, maybe, does that seem kind of like an odd choice for the record store? Maybe it was less aggressive than like Dazed and Confused or How Many More Times. It certainly wasn't as long as those songs, so maybe. So here we go, let's jump ahead to the end.
The Led Zeppelin take you on a trip you may never forget.
And Your Time Is Gonna Come, which is not a bad choice for in-store record play. Let's skip ahead. It's interesting there because it was actually the way it is on the album. Your Time Is Gonna Come segues right into Black Mountain Side, and when they made this sampler, apparently they didn't care that one song was bleeding into the other. They didn't fade out early from Your Time Is Gonna Come, which is odd. But they also chopped it right off too. It sounded like it was just they took a razor blade to the tape. They didn't even fade it out. So let's back up just a bit and hear going into the last one.
Yes, your time is going to come. In fact, it's here now. Get on board the Led Zeppelin on Atlantic Records for a flight out of sight.
That's interesting that they cut off the beginning notes of Communication Breakdown. Let's listen to that again.
Get on board the Led Zeppelin on Atlantic Records for a flight out of sight.
Well, the other reason for that, too, is, we'll go back one more time.
Get on board the Led Zeppelin on Atlantic Records for a flight out of sight.
That was coming right out of, if I remember right on the album, Black Mountain Side. So and there was just no gap in between at all. There was like a millisecond of a gap. So they may have didn't want to deal with the precise cutting. They just found a different place to splice it in. The first time I heard that, it was just like, it's a little bit jarring. They kind of missed it, but oh well, whatever. Let's skip to the end of the song here. Interesting that they did not back announce the Led Zeppelin. They just let the song go and faded it out. Remember around the end of side one, it's like here's Dusty Springfield. You'll find the album in your store right now. They didn't do the same thing with the Zeppelin side, which was interesting. And also at this time too, if this came out in, let's say, April of '69, that was right before Led Zeppelin was going on a United States tour. They started at the end of April on the 24th in San Francisco, 4 nights in San Francisco, and then they played through the end of May into like June 1st or so in there, and then they returned to England, and that's when they did the first BBC concert at the end of June. But that's when that popularity was just growing for Zeppelin by leaps and bounds. They put out the album, but then they toured relentlessly to promote that album, and it was picked up by all the FM stations. And back at the time, the FM stations, those were like underground stations. FM was not the predominant radio. Everything was on AM radio, and you had singles and everything. FM was more like, like for jazz lovers or high fidelity freaks, audiophiles. It wasn't really mainstream radio at that point. It was very seems to be specialized, and that underground sound of Led Zeppelin really fit in on FM radio. So now you have FM stations picking them up. They're on tour all the time, and here comes the in-store sampler that you go to the record store and you're going to hear it, and you may buy the album or buy a concert ticket or whatever. It's just a fascinating time in the history of the band. This album, by the way, very expensive apparently right now. I think I got my copy a couple of years ago for, I don't know, $50 or whatever it was. It was on eBay. I just took a look, and it sold within the last week on eBay for $632 for not even like a mint sealed copy or anything. It was just a regular copy. I looked on Discogs too, and the last couple, there's two for sale that are like $500 and $600. So probably because how many of these would have been pressed, right? How many record stores or record departments were there in the United States in 1969, and how many would get this album? Was it 1,000, 10,000? I don't know. How would you even figure that out? But it had to have been a limited run of these albums. And probably for the most part, once these albums had run their course, and the Dusty album and the Zeppelin album were in stores for 6 months, let's say, they were replaced by something else. So I would not be surprised if these albums just got discarded. They just throw them out. It's like, what do we need them for? We can't sell it, so just get rid of it. So, obviously a lot of people must have grabbed it from the store and put it in their own personal collection, and now they're coming back around as they're being sold. But a very interesting album. Samplers are great, and especially the in-store sampler designed specifically to be listened to in a store. There's just it's like bare bones. You look at that cover, it's white on the back, it's blank on the back, so all you have is the basic details in black and white. They didn't even bother with color printing. And as we saw on the labels for each side of the actual album, it's like a glorified typewriter. It's not no artwork, no anything, again, no color or anything. They just slapped it together, and there you go. But they thought it was something worth investing in back in '69. So there you go. Atlantic Records promotional LP for record department in-store play. Dusty Springfield, Dusty in Memphis, and Led Zeppelin, Led Zeppelin's first album. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you next time on Gary's Record Collection.